Good morning. Welcome to our webinar today on considerations for marketing success in China. My name's Ian Bennett. I'm the Senior Manager, International Trade, Australian Business Consulting and Solutions. China is a very key part of our delivery services, and in the future we'll be bringing to you some exciting new projects which will enable you to enter the China market. So I suggest you keep an eye on our webpage, australianbusiness.com.au, to see how you can use these innovative products and services we'll be bringing to you. During the webinar, we'll be attempting to answer some of the questions we've received already, and we'll be having a look at any questions that come through during the presentation. I have with me my colleague Philip. He's our digital producer at Australian Business Consulting and Solutions, and he's our expert on the marketing activities, requirements, success that we need. Phil.
Hi, I've got 15 years experience in marketing and digital. I've worked for corporates, automotives, etc. And I have experience in small business and medium businesses all around the world.
Right, looking at China, the economic development is something that's key to marketing. If you look back in 1984, there was about 1 billion people. Moving through to 2014. There's been a substantial increase of nearly 300 million. The economies have grown. The GDP per person has grown substantially, and year on year, the growth rate gives an indication of the size of this market. If those online were around when Ghostbusters first came out, you'll remember how far that is back, and the world has moved forward, and so has the China economy. Understanding the growth in the Chinese economy, it's now the second largest economy in the world. It's been the fastest growing over 30 years. You look at the GDP, even though it's low at around about $7,000, believe it or not, equal to that of some of the Eastern European states, it is still a very, very high wealth consuming market. If you think of the demographics across 1.3 billion people, and you start looking at the top 10, 15%, the GDP figures change substantially. Also, as this economy grows, the products and services which the Chinese consumer wants to buy also change. And their method of buying is changing. And this is one of the things we'll talk to you about today, is the online shopper versus the physical shopper that goes in to touch, see and smell his product. He's now consuming online. The other thing is that the Chinese consumer is looking for quality products. They understand what is being bought in the Western world, what is being consumed in the Western world. They want the same standards and the same quality, and they have the ability to pay for these sort of products. But when you start considering entering the Chinese market, there's a number of things to consider. It is a giant and complex market, and for an average SME, the consideration should be to start small. But even starting small, you need a considerable amount of market research. You've got to understand the rest of the world is also wanting to sell to China. The products that are put in there come from various economies at the low price end, medium price end, high price end. You've got to understand where your product is benchmarked. You've got to understand who your competitors are. Are they local competitors? Are they regional competitors from low-cost economies of ASEAN, the Indian subcontinent? or are your competitors from the developed nations? So once you have an understanding of, through your market research, of exactly who your competitors are, where your price points are, having a look at how your competitors market, are they moving into mass market, online market, the physical retail market, you can then start to develop your own market entry strategy. But once again, start small. You can choose any place in China basically as a starting point. Trying to cover all of China from day one is absolutely out of the question for a small to medium-sized enterprise. There's also other matters you consider is how you're actually going to enter the marketplace. Are you going to have a distributor? Are you going to have an on-ground presence through a representative office or a wholly owned foreign enterprise, which are these days called woofies? If you hear that expression, that's what we're talking about. Are you going to consider a joint venture? The latter, the joint ventures, even in marketing or manufacturing, are very complex in China, and for an SME, it is probably the last route that you consider to enter this market. Mind you, some companies have been successful in developing a joint venture presence, but traditionally for products and services, they're going in through distribution channels or agency channels. Also, starting first entry point, where are you going to start? You've got rural versus city. If you look at the tier 1 cities, which are traditionally your Shanghai, your Beijing, Guangzhou, these are your major tier 1 cities. They're very sophisticated cities. They have enormous populations, and they are being marketed to by some of the largest brand names in the world that have a physical presence, showroom presence, plus online presence. So for a small to medium-sized enterprise, tier 1 cities is probably not your target. That gives you your tier 2 cities. And these are still very, very rapid growth cities. They have populations in the millions. You'll find a tier 2 city could be similar to a Sydney, Melbourne, or Brisbane. And it is a fairly good entry point for first-time exporters. The logistics of getting your product to market are relatively easy. The sophistication of the consumer is still there as in a tier 1 city. They also have the buying power to purchase overseas products. The third tier is basically your rural cities, and there are approximately 200 countrywide cities, destinations that are classified as T3 before you get into the very vast rural areas where internet connectivity, distribution connectivity is very limited. And a strategy for entering those the tier 3 cities is nearly as complex as entering the tier 1 cities. We would suggest that you be looking at the tier 2, where you'll find a comfort level and a capability equal to your capability. Some of the sort of tier 2 cities are cities like Tianjin, Chengdu, Nanjing, Xi'an, and they have good economics, they're developing, and they are capable, once again, the consumers, the residents of these cities, the industry in these cities are quite capable of purchasing both industrial and consumer products. Once again, we can supply advice on how these cities are structured and how to enter these markets. Now, just to give us an example of how China is developing, some of the digital marketing, the enablement of the Chinese IT sector, we're going to introduce a case study to sort of set a flavour of some of the marketing activities, and I'm going to pass across to Phil to take you through this.
Excellent. This case study is about Seek and Xiaopin.com. Is that correct? Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. I'm going the right way already. So Seek is, as you know, is one of Australia's biggest recruitment and online training portals, and it makes a lot of money. It's about $5.5 billion a year in the market, and it was one of the highest climbing in 50 on the share market last year in 2013. So it's getting there. So it used a very easy entry strategy into the market. So there's only 23 million people in Australia that Seek strategy is obviously looking to expand constantly. So, and because not everyone is on the internet, if you think of some of the rural locations in Australia, China is an excellent market to go into. So, first up in 2006, Xiaopin, meaning recruitment in Mandarin, Seek decided to put a little money into it and see what it can do, and that money into it was 24% share, which is about $20 million. Then gradually increased its holding. It's now just about, I think, just under 70% after giving shares to the June IPO. So they're about to launch into the share market too. So with that and the credibility in the States, etc., use a very interesting tactic to get to the massive market of the Xiaopin, and that's subscription-based membership, and it's 250,000 companies actually use the subscription-based membership of Xiaopin's website. Most annual memberships cost between 3,000 to 5,000 yuan, and between 482. And it actually works really well because currently in the Seek market in Australia, you only pay usually for advertising. If you're another recruitment agency, you do pay a monthly subscription, but it's not as profitable as the Chinese market. Xiaopin has an unusual way of deciding whether to enter new markets. It looks for coffee shops. If a small Chinese city has a Starbucks, Pacific Coffee, or a similar coffee seller, Mr. Zhao said the city likely has a significant number of job seekers looking for office positions and Xiaopin's target market. Coffee culture is an indicator that people are becoming white collar in the cities, and the Tier 1 and Tier 2s that Ian mentioned previously. Well, what's the secret to the success of Seek? A lot of patience. As Ian said previously, you have to go in knowing the strategy, what's going to happen, and thinking about it long term, and strategizing for the future. So Seek went in with patience. They enter the market slowly and quietly. Use local talent and knowledge, are not immediately replacing existing staff with Seek executives, maintaining acquisition companies' integrity and branding, use their knowledge and experience to build on local success, build shares to majority levels. One of Seek's MD internationally, Jason Linger, said, "There's a lot of thinking we are doing in Australia and globally that can be exported into the Chinese market. The direction of where we think the market is going and the technology services we can help them with to deliver a much better experience for a job seeker and therefore capture more of the value." Xiaopin's trading things. They are doing things that we can learn from ourselves. They are making some changes to functionality and services. We will give them ideas and share them with our thinking on the direction we are seeking the market to go, and what we are saying, just must do it our way. In June 2014, Xiaopin was floated on the New York Stock Exchange and raised $75 million. This is a great example of Australia going into China and making it work using technology and local knowledge. So digital marketing, what I wanted to discuss about the digital side is where to start, understanding the complexity about China's growing market, and the various pathways we can go ahead and do these things. First, I wanted to go through some of the information about China and the market, especially on the internet. It's almost an equal split between male and female. One of the very important things that we have to look at here is 74% of all internet access is coming from mobile. So if you're traditionally using a desktop site and you use it usually, and it works really well in Australia, having a desktop site, in the Chinese market, you need to think about that 74% of people are actually accessing the internet through the mobiles. So if you don't have a responsive website or a mobile website specifically, you're already locking out 74% of possible clients that you may have in the Chinese market. Another thing to notice is that 91% of people are accessing the devices from home. So usually in Australia, it's a bit of a split between transport and at work, but in the Chinese market, a lot of things are happening at home. So what's the most popular things in the market that people are doing? The number one thing is instant messaging. So it's not your typical only SMS, but they're using apps like WhatsApp and different apps like that they constantly communicate, are in groups, and communicate with their friends or family using this method. So the second most important is they search. They search a lot. And that's great for us because if there's a need for something and you have a product that solves a problem, it'll be great to be inside the Chinese market because they do use search. Another thing is music and blogging. They love blogging. They love reading, and they love opinions too, which goes along with, I'll mention a little later about reviews. They love reading reviews about products. So it's interesting to know. It's a little bit different from Australia. So digital marketing online search with Baidu. 75% of clicks on paid ads. What I'm saying here, 75% of clicks on paid ads mean most people are actually pressing the paid ads above organic ads. We're usually used to Google having the paid ads at the top and the organic ads below, and sometimes about an equal split between 50-50 of people actually using ads and other people are scrolling down and finding organic results. Unlike the counterparts in the West, the Chinese are more likely to click on a paid over an organic advert, but it continue warns consumers that the SEO adverts, the search engine optimized adverts, called organic, are unregulated and sometimes untrustworthy. So that's interesting that they put that in. That combined with the rigorous set of process to conduct PPC, paid advertising in the Chinese market, it's not as easy as it is here. Currently in Australia and in the States, you can set up a Google advertising account in under 2 to 3 minutes. In China, especially Baidu, you actually need at least 2-3 weeks of going back and forth using a reseller to actually get your ad up there. So what does that mean? The quality of the ad is inspected constantly and making sure that the company is selling what it's actually advertising. So this makes the method of advertising and the reasons the paid ads are that high and more reliable is because of this fact. Another thing that that is very unique to Baidu, it offers refunds for purchases. So if you've clicked on an ad and you've bought something from someone who's advertised with them, and that product is not as it said, it actually they will offer you a refund, which is a very interesting system. Could you imagine Google offering you a refund for any advert you've clicked on and bought from that didn't suit your needs, or was not working, or was counterfeit? It was almost unheard of, which is an excellent, it's an excellent thing for the market, and that just goes to show that people have a lot of trust. So, in a digital sphere, it's an excellent way to get your product out there once you reach China, or if you're selling from Australia and you're trying to make a bit of a gateway into the Chinese market, it might be a nice way to move into China using this market. There's agencies out there that actually would look after the advertising for you. It does take a little time. It does take a little patience and understanding of the market in China. Everything works quick, but at the same time, when you're trying to do something digital, it does take its time. So I highly recommend you try this search engine to get your product out there. Digital marketing, as I mentioned before, 75% of mobile users are using are using the internet. It outranks the UK and US in m-commerce. M-commerce actually means mobile commerce, so any website, e-commerce website that you go on your mobile and you make a transaction, right? So 130 million mobile searches are made on Baidu every single year. So that's a lot of people doing that. So as I mentioned before, 380 million people are on desktops, 242 are on laptops, and 388 thousand of those are on mobile. So that's 13% more mobile internet users. So once again, very important. Your website needs to be mobile compatible, or you're already at a disadvantage when you're entering the Chinese market. Consumer trends. In 2013, 49% of the Chinese population made at least one online purchase, with 22% making more than 40 purchases per year. Imagine being able to capture some of that purchasing power and profits, of course. Over 72% of internet users were city-based, and of the 27% or so of rural users, the vast majority are mobile internet users due to lack of infrastructure. So the Tier 2, actually probably the Tier 3 are using mobiles to make purchases instead of desktop computers. Online search is dominated by Baidu, the Chinese Google, with Google China a distant third behind Soso, which is another search engine. Consumer trends in social media. We all are used to some of our social media we use every day. Unfortunately, the way it works in China, most Western social media is not accessible. Okay, so, but then again, they have alternatives, and Youku is the YouTube. Highly recommend you go look at the site. Very interesting videos, and how it works. It's a little different from YouTube, and that's why it's a good idea to actually see what people are looking at and how they digest content out there, because it's very important. If you're redeveloping your website with a Chinese strategy, seeing how things are laid out, this might be a good chance to see what social media does and to see what people are doing. Weibo is the Twitter. Once again, highly recommend you check it out. Log into Twitter to Weibo, and you'll see what differences it has between Twitter. Renren is the Facebook alternative. Once again, looks a lot like Facebook, acts a lot like Facebook, but it's not Facebook. But then again, that's where the consumers are, so it's a very interesting market. And it works really well. You should have a look. I highly recommend, if you haven't, to have a look. Remember, all these social media networks also have mobile sites, and most of the traffic is coming through mobile. So it's a very important point to remember, that you have to be mobile first when it comes to the Chinese market. I'll send it back to Ian on some consumer trends.
Just on social media, we will be having another webinar coming up shortly in the next 3 or 4 weeks on social media, and how you can utilize that for your marketing activities in China. As I said before, there's many things that are different in China, but they're wanting to consume Western Australian products and services. But when developing your strategies, looking into the Chinese market, your research, your preparation, whether it be for your website, whether it be for your brochures, whether it be for how you're going to interact on social media, there's certain things that will never change. There's unlucky numbers and there's lucky numbers. I'm sure that you'll have identified driving around Sydney, if you see a car with a number plate 8888, you'll most likely find it's a Chinese driver. These are very good numbers, and there's very unlucky numbers. Also, when you're thinking of branding, thinking of gifts, cats is an example. Unless it's golden, it is a bad omen. Just like we have in Australia, black cats crossing us in the street. We don't like that either. Wearing green hats, whether that be a peak cap or a formal hat, it has an indication that you haven't really been upfront with your wife. Clocks are an inappropriate gift. These sort of little nuances. Clock, when it actually translates into Mandarin, it actually sounds like I'm going to attend someone's funeral. So you've got to be careful on some of these nuances, and that's where it's really important to speak to someone who understands these cultural awarenesses, the superstitions, and how you will develop your websites and your promotional materials. And once again, Australian Business has these in-house capabilities to help you. The other thing here we're looking at is languages. Okay, there's Mandarin, but there's also hundreds of ethnic dialects that move throughout China. A lot of people think that they developed their website for Hong Kong and they've used Cantonese, so people in the Pearl River Delta will be able to see it. It doesn't work. You've actually got to have your language worked out for mainland China in Mandarin. The use of local translators is absolutely essential. When you're developing your capabilities, have someone in China actually read your translations, look at your websites, your Mandarin web pages, your Mandarin brochureware, and when going to meetings to start negotiating with potential buyers in China, take your translator, because you know that you will have briefed them first. They will have a good understanding of your business and of what you're negotiating. If you use the client's translator, you will not be sure that the message has got through, and after the meeting you won't be able to sit down and discuss with the translator what actually happened in the room, how the body language was translated, the real nuances of the culture that happened in that conversation. If you have the ability to use English in your discussions, use academic English, and by academic English we mean don't use local jargon that you'd use at home. You wouldn't go into a formal meeting and say, "G'day, mate." You'd actually go in there and say, "Good morning, good afternoon, it's good to see you." So we're talking academic language, we're taking out the slang. Also, when meeting people for the first time in China, do not use a first name. Say hello formally, address the person with the right Mr. or Mrs. And the family name. It's not until sometime later in there that you maybe have the opportunity to go on to a first name basis as your business develops. Cool. The quality control is essential. You've all heard the stories that have come out of China that have been publicized in the newspapers in Australia. One of them was the milk powder and how it was contaminated with melamine, which was an absolute disaster for the baby food industry in China. But one person's misfortune created an absolutely magnificent opportunity for Australia. Being a large producer of milk products, dried milk products, we are now seen as a trustworthy, high quality, reliable and safe supplier. The demand for Australian food products, particularly packaged products, is growing exponentially. It doesn't matter whether it's a food product or a toy. Unfortunately, there was the Martell product that was made for Disney that had lead paint applied to it and caused serious problems in a number of countries around the world, and actually led to the total failure of the manufacturer in China. So Chinese are well aware of what's good and what's bad, what's needed. We are seen as trustworthy. We're seen as delivering high quality. A lot of our products will fit into probably the top 20 to 15% of the demographic, that have the capability and the purchasing power to buy. And as Philip said earlier, if you have a look at what they're doing on the internet, there is 418 million people researching before they buy. And the other interesting thing that Phil mentioned is the blogging. Once people find a good product, the blogs go out there and the quality of the product grows exponentially, the desire. Secondly, though, on the other side of the coin, if you have failed to deliver the quality, you've failed in your distribution, that blogging can bring you down as well. So it's very important that reliable comment there is front of mind. Get your supply chains in place. Make sure that you can deliver what you're putting up on the internet. We've also got color sensitivities. Obviously, if you want to attract attention, whether it be in the physical presence or an internet presence, color plays a big role in catching the eye, getting people to look. And here are some very interesting comments. Yellow actually refers to the old culture of China, which still proliferates through into today's modern culture, where we have gold looking at royalty, and those gold in those days, yellow in those days was probably gold. Red is always a powerful and lucky color. You've seen that happen in Australia with all the Chinese New Year celebrations. Everything is red, red, red. It's lucky, it's powerful. Blue and green sort of looked at one of the best seasons of the year, the growing season of spring and the vitality it brings. White is a color of mourning, a color of funerals, and black is also the color of not only winter, the unknown, and death. So you've got to think carefully of how you will present your products, how you'll package your products, how you'll even present your business card. These things are essential to understand, and being culturally aware will lead you on to greater success in this marketplace. And once again, we have the in-house capability of guiding you on these cultural sensitivities. Now the next thing is, once again, looking at how a case study of a very large corporation, which we all know, works in China. Phil, would you like to take us through this?
Yes. So we're going to talk about Coca-Cola, which quite clearly you can see the Western logo at the top and the bottom, the Chinese version of that same logo. One of the things that stands out is you can probably tell even without seeing this that on a can that it is probably Coca-Cola, and there's reasons behind that, especially like big companies like Coca-Cola. They think about localizing every strategy. So all around the world, they think about a strategy, how they can enter a local market to make sense. For example, in America, the advertising slogan for Coca-Cola is "Can't Beat That Feeling." In Australia, it's "Real Taste." In Russia, it's Coca-Cola is in the house. That's very nightclubby. And there's also in India, it's "Whatever you wish will come true. Enjoy Coca-Cola." So as I mentioned, making it localized, the strategy being localized is very important. Like any market around the world, and of course Coca-Cola with its size can do this very quickly and adopt very quickly. So let's go through the logo itself. So it's not just there's obviously that the logo has changed and the translation has changed and the color will change because they've reversed the red and made it the main color. So the Coca-Cola, like the product itself, is rated amongst the most recognized classical logos and brands in the world. The original bright red and white color scheme logo is global unified. Yep. It's visually identifies Coca-Cola, as I mentioned before, all around the world. There are three core elements in the visual identity. Sorry, let me repeat that. The visual identity system of Coca-Cola, which are broadly accepted by the consumers all around the world. The name of the brand Coca-Cola It is a unique name that is represented by people from all around the world once again. And let's think about the standard color is red. Red is actually a good color for the Chinese market already, and it's already, like for Coca-Cola, it's the brand out there. The typeface with the ribbon patterns make the whole logo of Italian and about the dynasty actually makes a lot of sense for the Chinese market too. So they've used the interesting font, which is basically matches the Coca-Cola font, but obviously for the Chinese language it represents. One of the things that what does actually mean when you translate the words Coca-Cola to the Chinese language. So, for example, it sounds the same when it's pronounced, and but what it actually means, the ke part means permission, the ku means mouth, ki means permission, and the le means happiness. So the combination of the former two characters mean can eat, good to eat. The later two characters mean can be happy. So the Chinese name of Coca-Cola means deliciously happy, basically. It is a name that is recognized as one of the most beautiful translations and brings luck and popularity to Coca-Cola. Secondly, Coca-Cola's Chinese logo design adopts a white on red, which is the most prominent feature of the Coca-Cola and also coincides with traditional Chinese festivals color red in China. Red has a special meaning to the Chinese, and we already mentioned it's a traditional popular festival color, so it's very important for the Chinese already, which reflects happiness and prosperity. Luck, celebration, and the spirituality are a material pursuit of Chinese people. So that's another great example of obviously a big brand doing it right in China, but then again a lot to think about, a lot of the words, playing with words and the colors and the fonts even used mean a lot. So it's one of those important factors of this case study. And of course the packaging and endorsement part of this. Did you want to talk about that, Ian, or do you want me to go through? Okay, I'll keep going then. All good. The packing endorsement, Chinese culture and events. So if you think about in Australia currently, when you're buying a can of Coke, we've had multiple promotions. Some promotions being around having names, and you're buying cans of Coke or bottles of Coke with your name on it. There's other things that happen all the time when the Olympics are going on. Coca-Cola once again is putting pictures of Olympic athletes on the cans. And also when the World Cup was on, there was also more things happening on the Coca-Cola cans in Australia. Well, this of course happens also in the packaging overseas, and especially in the Chinese market. So when Coca-Cola adapted a new packaging, it's taking the point to the market of the audience. So it's really going down and targeting the persona of its consumers that drink Coca-Cola. For example, they use celebrities that Chinese young people like, because that's exactly the market. Chinese traditional culture, so they think about the culture. So when they're designing the actual the cans and the graphics on the cans, they think about these things. So what would attract the market? Very important, because once again, your website, if you're going to China, you make sure you actually feel like you understand, and you need to understand with research about how everyone's doing, and that's one thing we can help Australian Business Consulting and Solutions, of course. And another thing that we need to remember on the packaging is that there's events. There's always special events and traditional events, significant events for Chinese people, and that's another thing that Coca-Cola does well. And to be honest, they probably do that well all over the world. They really localize, very smart on the branding, and of course they go local for the information. They don't make up the information in a boardroom in some American corporation. They move their offices to a location and they build from there. So it's very important. You have to think local every single time. So once again, this going on with what we were saying about on the advertising side. In Australia, we do see Coca-Cola advertised during Christmas with Santa, but to the Chinese, it actually changes, and it becomes a more cultural focus to the Chinese market. So understanding the target audience is obviously significant for the brand. It's necessary for a brand to know the need that its target audience requires. Coca-Cola recognizes that consumers in different regions have different cultural backgrounds and preferences, especially in China. People desire happiness, family connections, so the company pays more attention to these facts, and it's very important to do so. Coca-Cola advertising in China changed its main popular character from Santa Claus in a picture of two children wearing Chinese costumes. Once again, changing things all the time to suit, and of course they're also adding pictures of dragons, etc., to make things very interesting. So that's another case study. As I mentioned, even the advertising changes are not using the typical characteristics and fun outdoor lifestyle that represents Australian people, making it different using cultural icons in China. Cultural awareness and business practices. I think this one's for you, Ian.
That's right, Phil. Just sort of taking into consideration what Phil's just been through there, some of the best practices and business practices. You probably start off engaging yourself in the culture when you have your business card translated. I have seen some actual novices who've not only translated the Australian name, their their title, but they've also translated their address. So when you your Chinese counterpart that you've been dealing with in China moves forward very happily, writing your address in Australia in Mandarin, and it arrives here and the postman has absolutely no idea where to send it. So I would suggest very, very strongly, start with your name and your title, and that should be sufficient on your business card. Also be very culturally aware of changing your name, your company name, into Mandarin. Coca-Cola has done it very successfully, and they would have had a team of people working on it to make sure that the translation best reflected their product and their name. There have been many, many mistakes in translating a company business name into Mandarin without thinking about all the cultural issues. So when we've got our business card built, printed, we then have a meeting. Meetings are fairly formal on the first occasion. I would suggest you do not talk politics. You talk about your business. You talk about your product. You talk about your company. Ask questions about your visitor's company. Keep it at a fairly formal level until you both get to know each other. Then you can move into certain elements of the family. You may move away from the formal Mr. and Mrs. into first name basis. If you're there with colleagues, make sure that everyone in the room is introduced with an official title. So everybody in the room knows who they're speaking to. And should there be representatives from your client, your potential client there, gently seek introductions to everyone else in the room on their side to understand the role they're playing, so when you're having a discussion, you can understand who's in the room and why they're there. So finally, folks, we've come to the end. I hope that this has been informative for you. We believe that a digital marketing strategy, or any marketing strategy into China, needs to get it right the first time. We will, no matter what your marketing perceptions are in Australia, we need to consider about the fact that there's the cultural issues we've been through with the case studies and the various commentary. And in many cases, the normal elements of your marketing, you've basically got to throw out the door. You've got to think as a Chinese person would think on how they will accept your promotions, your products, the reasons for buying, how they communicate with each other, and how your product is assessed by the people in the China market. So you've actually got to really tailor your marketing programs, whether it be physical or online, to meet that audience. And once again, Australian Business Consulting and Solutions has the right capabilities to guide you on your marketing presentations. Phil, as you've probably gathered, is a digital marketing expert. So whether you're going into the physical or the digital, we're here to help you. We thank you for being here today. We do apologize for a few little hiccups on the way through. I like the music for a little bit, but not too long, but we'll get over that. This webinar will be online. It'll be loaded up onto the Australian Business International Trade website in the very near future. So if anybody would like to have a look through that again on some of the salient points, please do. As mentioned earlier, we'll be having further webinars on doing business in China, social media, and we'll also be bringing up in the future webinars on other country destinations where Australian exporters are achieving success, and we hope that we can be a part of the pathway for those successes. Thank you and good afternoon.
Yeah, we have a few questions here that we can answer really quickly, just because we're very we're thinking about the time. We're almost run out of time, but there is a few questions. Kevin has asked if there's if we offer capable translation services for China, and that's right, we do. In Australian business, we do have translation services. Not only we can even take you to China. Is that right? Yeah, we can take you to China.
Correct.
And,
yes, yes,
with the translators and introduce you to different people. And we've worked with a few translation websites too for the market, different e-commerce stores, very large e-commerce stores. So yes, we do. There's also a few questions about how can we target the local Chinese community in Australia. I guess I'll answer that one straight away too. So it's all about understanding the persona. So it's a little different. The Chinese market in China is obviously they're used to different media, different content, different advertising, where in Australia they're to a certain extent westernized. So what you have to do is target the areas that you will find that people are about. So you can target certain locations around Sydney, depending where you are. You can find where your community, where a lot of people of the same races are generally, and you can understand it. And that's where you can spend your advertising dollars in the local papers there. So if you have something to advertise, of course, translate it, get it translated professionally, as Ian mentioned before, and put it in the local paper. The local paper would always help. And then again, online, once again, you can also target using Google advertising. You can also target that local area, and with the message, the advertising message can be specific for your market. You have to think about who you're targeting. It's one of the most important things there. So that's the answer to that question. I think that was from Fiona. Joint ventures and pitfalls.
Yes, well, we quickly mentioned that before. It is a very complex negotiation to do a joint venture in China. It's something that would probably take a 1 or 2 hour webinar to go through all the elements required to be successful in a joint venture, and we're happy to discuss that offline.
Yeah, there's one more questions. Quality control, are there standards that you must reach in order to get into China?
Each product has various regulations around it. If we're talking about anything that is consumed, e.g. any food product or beverage, any cosmetics, toiletries, nutraceuticals, all of these products, first of all, have to be registered. They have to be tested by the government. The registration projects, a process for some of these products to meet standards can take up to 9 to 12 months, some even longer. There is basically a standard for every product that goes into China. Unfortunately, most of them are written in Mandarin, and in many cases, many of them are difficult to find. But once again, that is something that we do on a pretty regular basis. We actually interpret the Mandarin regulations to enable you to be guided on how best to present your product, whether your product is suitable, or whether the journey for registration is a journey too long, and maybe other markets are more suitable for you. So if you have a product that requires, you believe, a standard compliance, we can find the regulation and we can give you advice on how to move forward to get that registered. And there's our contact details on the screen right now. And look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Keep an eye on our homepage at Australian Business Consulting and Solutions International Trade page, and you'll see the events coming up in the very near future. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. See you later.